Okay, everybody, time for another update on this Whipple charged intercooled Fox body build. Last update, I went into how I got the supercharger together here. I'm still working on that. This is going to be, I would say, it's a carburetor hat is what's going on there, really. This is going to be part of the base. That's the diameter it's going to be, and it's going to be like a carburetor, like a 4-barrel hat. It's going to come off the side, and that's going to be the discharge and go through the intercoolers and all, and then back into the intake. So I just wanted to go over this before I get so far into it that I can't explain what I did here, because the big question is, you could talk about doing it, but talking about it is one thing, and actually being able to mount this 50-pound assembly to a part of the engine where nothing is designed to be mounted is proving to be a challenge. And since you don't want any stress on the casing of the supercharger, in mounting it, because usually they're mounted like directly to the intake, so it's just mounted in one spot. But here, when you're remotely, you kind of have to take up the stress by a frame rather than the actual case itself, and the case will sit into the frame, 3 bolts in the back, and then it attaches in the front here. And well, I went over my jet ski propulsion system that I used to kind of isolate the snout from taking any stress. But I discovered the first thing is to get part of it mounted, the critical part, and that to me is the part that's going to be by the injectors, and this has to be level. And so how do you do that? I found that 3 intake bolts here are in line. They're right in line. They're a little different level. This one here sits higher than these two, or a little down in the valley, which you kind of have to play with washers and spacers to get them all to equal height. But I've got them mounted, and just with those 3 bolts, this thing is pretty secure. So of course I'm going to have to figure out what I'm going to do over here on this side and in the front. But that's the framing. And I actually had the supercharger in there so I could line up the pulleys, and I had this belt on it to make sure that everything was in line, so that I could drill these 3 holes in the proper place so that everything's going to fall into alignment. And the belt setup here, it's gonna be something like this. We got the '89 Lincoln Town Car brackets and everything, water pump, crank pulley. They're gonna be riding on the outer one here, and superchargers up here. And this thing that looks like an alternator, it was an alternator. It came off of, I was mounted in the same spot actually on the Lincoln Town Car. Of course, in the Mustangs it's over on this side, but that's the actual alternator is going to be relocated still on that side, driven by the rear drive. So there's actually 2 separate belts on here. Now this is going to be for the tensioner. I used just the case from the alternator so that I could mount a tensioner in here, and I've even got a little bit of adjustment with this because I didn't make a bracket over here yet. But I just ordered the tensioner today because I'm going to be using, believe it or not, a tensioner from a 2.2 Chevy Cavalier. This is a good example. 91 Cavalier. I think it's a Dayco part number 89226. And it's just it's a plate. but I'm going to fabricate it to mount to the, I found out the spacing between here and here is the same as two of the bolts, so I have to trim the plate down, and the tensioner should be sitting right in the middle. That's a project all in itself. But and it's going to pull this way. You know, you have to keep in mind, you know, you don't want it pulling down in directions that you don't want. But I went to the auto parts store and I went through like the whole inventory, and that's what I found. But there you go. It's coming along. We're mounted up here. This is pretty sturdy for just being on there with 3 bolts. But there's going to end up being probably at least 2 more on this side and 1 or 2 in the front here. Make everything secure. And that's where we're at for now. And like I said, the hat is going to be located right about here, and it's going to be dumping off to the side and then into the intercooler. So I think that's about wraps it up for now. I just wanted to make this point about the bolts on the intake here. I had to use studs because they're just bolts. The studs I took from in the back, there was a stud here, and there was a stud over here for the Mustang plenum. It's that bar, that reinforcement bar. It uses 2 studs. So I used 2 studs from there, and I had to get an extra one. And I used those, and I used some, these are collars, threaded rod collars, built up in like, I think these Allen bolts. They're 3/16, no, I'm sorry, 5/16 18 thread. I think I used 2 inchers for, no, this was a shorter one. This was a 2 inch, and these were 1 3/4. That's what it was. And you have to play with that. It took me a while to figure that out, that they both come out even. In fact, I still need to add a couple washers on here. But I mean, for right now, for Jamaica purposes, it sits there pretty well. So that's it, coming along. That's the configuration. We're gonna the supercharger pulley is going to be right about here. So it's right in line with everything else. It's not sitting way off to the side. So I shouldn't have any belt slippage issues as long as the tensioner is in the right place, and that's routed correctly. It's not like it's sitting way. I've seen some people mount these things like remotely, like out here. But I think we're gonna be okay. So that's the update for now.